Hi everybody, Bearded Rogue here, and today I'm going to do something that's a little bit different for me. I'm actually going to do a board game review. I know I do the Three Things I Love series of reviews, but this time I want to go a little bit more in depth on a game that, full disclosure, I actually won a pre-production copy of this in a contest. And it was sent to me. The Kickstarter for it is currently going on, and that game is Fire of Eidolon. Fire of Eidolon is from Magic Meeple Games. They are the people who had Dark Rock Ventures on Kickstarter last year. I'm really looking forward to receiving my copy of that game. However, they have, as I said, a Kickstarter up currently for Fire of Eidolon. So what is Fire of Eidolon? Well, Fire of Eidolon is a cooperative game, so that immediately piqued my interest. It is also a dungeon crawler, so that also piqued my interest. And it plays in probably, I'd say 30 minutes to an hour at most. An hour in a teaching game, maybe. It's probably about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, based on the playthroughs that I've had. I've played it now at this point solo, which is a distinct possibility. You can play it solo. I played it in a 5-player game and then 3-player games. I've played more than that. I've played multiple games at each player count except for 5. I only have one of those games. One 5-player game under my belt, but I've played at solo at least 5 times, and then I've played 3-player games. So I think that's about it. And let me just say that I love this game. Love it. It's in a similar vein to the Forbidden games, Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, as far as the way that it feels and the speed at which it plays. However, it's a little bit more meaty than either of those, and that's not a bad thing. It's not like ultra crunchy or mechanics heavy. It's just got a little bit more to it as far as how the game works, and the roles that each person takes in the game are a little bit more involved. For those not familiar with the Forbidden games, this is a light to medium-ish co-op game. Definitely lighter than Pandemic or some of the other big-name co-op games that are out there. But it really has a lot to sink your teeth into. So let me go into some of that instead of just rambling. Let me show you some of the stuff. So again, this is a prototype, so while some of the artwork will show up in the final version of the game, this is by no means what the final version of the game looks like. So the first thing I said is that it plays solo and up to 6 players. So here I have 6 different classes here that you can play as, each with their awesome little pixel art avatars, which I believe are staying the same for the final version of the game, but the character boards will not be low color, and they won't be printed on, you know, thick cardstock resume paper. But let's go over the characters. So this is the Rogue. Of course I'm going to show you the Rogue. Why would I show you anybody else? So you got the artwork, and then in this section it tells you how many, it tells you what your stats are and how many action points you need to claim the various keys or tokens in the dungeon. Overall, what you're trying to do is you're trying to collect all of these tokens in the dungeon so that you can smash the dark relics that are guarding the Fire of Eidolon. And then you want to get the Fire of Eidolon and get out of the dungeon. So each token corresponds to a different type of ability that you need to use to overcome the challenge to get that token. And then each character also has a skill that they can use pretty much every round. Some of them are limited to once per round. Some of them are passive abilities that are always on. And then a once per game skill, which is like a super effect that your character can use once a game to kind of bail you out of when things start getting hairy. And they will get hairy. So up to 6 players, multiple difficulties. I found that hard is really feels about right for me and my groups that I've played with. The normal feels a little bit easy, and the very hard starts to be really challenging. You can lose this game on normal or beginner mode. It is quite possible. So don't think that the easier difficulty levels are easy. It's not an overall easy game. So, basically, you'll have these room tiles. So this is the vestibule. This is basically the starting chamber. This is where all of the players start, and also where you need to get back to with the Fire of Eidolon to win the game. So you have to get to this chamber. And then there are other chambers. So like this is the floating stones. It is a dexterity chamber. It's got its green border. So it will have, when it comes out onto the map, one of these little green keys on it. So when you get here, you can use action points based on your stats. So if you're a dexterity character like the rogue here, you can pick this token up for 1 action point. If you are not a dexterity character, it may cost you 2 or even 3 action points. You get 3 action points on your turn, so it behooves you to have a dexterity-based character come and pick this up. Why do you want to pick this up? Well, you actually need to pick 6 of these up. Because once you have 6 of these, you can go smash this treasure, which is guarding the Fire of Eidolon. The Fire of Eidolon is your ultimate end goal. It's the MacGuffin at the end of the dungeon that you're trying to recover and get out. So once you've gathered 6 treasures, you'll then go find, and let me find the room here, you'll go find this shadow focus room where this green gem lives, and you'll turn in all those tokens to smash this. Once you've smashed this, and the other 2 treasures, which are this heart and this book here, once you've smashed those, the same way you smash the other one by getting keys of the corresponding color, you can then go to the Chamber of the Fire of Eidolon, pick it up, and then run out of the dungeon as everything goes to heck. So, you'll be exploring the dungeon and placing these types of rooms out. So dexterity rooms are typically like physical challenges or traps or things of that nature. Then there are the monster rooms, which require strength to defeat. So this ogre brute here, your warrior and your paladin are your best at taking him out. And then there will be mystic type challenges that require a higher intelligence, like this paradox puzzle. It doesn't require an intelligence character. Let me be clear on that. There's no combination of characters that you choose that cannot win. It's just that if you choose a character that has the highest level of each stat, it will be easier for you to win. It's certainly not guaranteed, and you're not totally handicapped and screwed if you don't have someone with each one of the stats. Because, for example, this rogue here, his dex is 3, so he can pick up dex stuff for 1 token. His intelligence is 2, so he only needs to use 2 action points to solve this paradox puzzle. He's better at intelligence stuff. The strength thing, he's a little bit weak in. He would need his whole turn to pick up a strength token. So maybe he wants to bring a buddy who's better at that. But he could bring, say, for example, the ranger here, who's also a 3 in dex, but has 2 strength instead of 2 intelligence. So both of them could work together to kind of make up the deficit in the 2 stats that they aren't strong in. However, if you have a 3-player game, you might as well bring 1 of each. 1 dex class, 1 int class, 1 strength class. You know, build a party, D&D style, with strengths and weaknesses where all of you cover for each other. There's no dice rolling in this game. So it's a dungeon crawl with no dice rolling. You walk into the room, so in this case you'd walk into the room with the ogre brute, and then you would defeat this guy based on what your strength stat is. Or you'd walk into this paradox puzzle room, and then you would solve this puzzle based on what your intelligence stat is. And these floating stones you would navigate using your dex stat. And then you would get to pick up the challenge token that's there, and then maneuver about the maze as you build it, acquiring these tokens so that you can smash the treasures so that you can get the Fire of Eidolon. Well, that part sounds simple. You're just wandering around fetch quest style, getting all the stuff you need to move on to the next step in the progression. So how do you fail this? Well, unfortunately for you, this place, this temple that you're going into, this dungeon complex, this building, is inhabited by cultists, because it always is cultists. And the cultists have the ability to basically send this entire temple complex into the void, one room at a time. So what'll happen is, on this chart here, depending on your difficulty, will determine how many ritual cards you draw at the end of each player's turn. So much like the cards in Pandemic, you'll flip over a certain number of cards and bad things will happen to those areas. So, for example, every room has one of these cards. So remember the Floating Stones, the Ogre Brute, and the Paradox Puzzle? Each one of those have a card in the dungeon complex in the ritual deck. Every room in the dungeon complex except for the, vestibule and then the rooms where the treasures themselves are. So you can never lose the room from the Fire of Eidolon. However, you may lose your pathway to that room, which means that you cannot win the game. But these guys right here, when you draw one of these, you'll put one of these cultists on that room. Now, one of the things you can do is you can beat up cultists, because who doesn't love beating up cultists? It's one of the most fun things to do in a fantasy game. Even Ascension lets you do it an infinite number of times. You'll be beating up cultists a lot in this game, because as you draw these cards, these will come out on the rooms. If a room ever gets a second cultist, it's banished to the void and is gone forever. So, if it still happens to have a treasure on it that you haven't picked up, it's gone, and so is that treasure. Forever. There's only one more treasure of each type than there are treasures that you need to win. So if two rooms of the same color, or two treasures of the same color, ever get exiled to the void, unless you can bring them back, which one of the characters has the ability to once a game bring a room back, unless you can bring them back, then you lose. That's it. So there's not a lot of margin for error. So you're using your action points, of which you only have 3, to navigate the dungeon, find the treasures by defeating the challenges, use the treasures to smash the evil relics, so that you can get the Fire of Eidolon, so that you can try to run it out of the entryway, and all the while you're smacking down cultists left and right to try to keep everything from disappearing out from underneath your feet. To say that it is tense would be an understatement. It will take a lot of management of the player abilities to actually succeed in your mission. Your player abilities are not insignificant, however. So whenever you place dungeon tiles, of course, the doors have to line up. So, like, this paradox puzzle can only be oriented in a couple of ways because it doesn't have a door down here. So you can connect it in a couple of different ways. So the dungeon complex tends to sprawl, which of course doesn't help when you know that the very last thing you need to do is grab something and run out of the place. But your characters have some ways to mitigate that. So, like, for example, the rogue's once per game ability is that he can gain 3 extra action points, so he can have a turn that's 6 action points. He also has the ability to move through half walls. So, for example, say this room butted up to this room like this. No player can move through here normally, but the rogue can. When he uses his ultimate ability, his ultimate ability, he can actually move through rooms that don't match at all. So he could actually walk through this space right here with his 6 action point turn. So he can navigate the map very, very quickly. So the rogue's very cool that way. The ranger actually has a passive ability in that when they explore, they don't have to move into the new room that they were at. So if they're in, like, say, this vestibule room, they could use their 3 actions to explore 3 different directions from this room. Everybody else would have to explore and then move into the new room that they've added, and then they could explore from there. So the ranger has that ability. He also has the ability to just go pick up a token from you may collect a single token from any chamber in the dungeon and give it to any hero in the dungeon by sending your falcon out. So if there's some place that's really out of the way that would take a whole bunch of actions to get to, the ranger can just get it once per game. The warrior is the king of SmackDown. So normally when you're beating up on cultists, you can only beat up on cultists that are in your room. The warrior can beat up cultists in rooms that are adjacent to him as well. And his special ability actually lets him move 3 times, and each time he moves, stabs something. So he can do a lot of damage and clear out a dungeon really quick. Speaking of clearing out a dungeon, you have the paladin. So the paladin, special ability Smite, once per turn he can just smack somebody down anywhere in the dungeon. Doesn't have to be in the same room as them, doesn't have to be adjacent to them, just once per turn this cultist goes away, no matter where it is. And then his special ability lets him basically drop an AoE on the dungeon, which will kill a cultist in the room it's in, and then the 4 adjacent rooms that are orthogonal to it once per game. So he kind of drops a nuke on the bad guys. The wizard has object portal, so the wizard can actually send tokens to other players, no matter where they are. Normally, in order to transfer a token from one player to another, you have to be in the same room. The wizard can just go, nope, here you go, nope, here you go, and just send them to everybody else. He also has teleport, which will let him move anywhere in the dungeon as long as he's not carrying the fire of Eidolon, because you can't use your player abilities when you have the fire in your possession. But he can actually teleport right to the fire, pick it up, and then start running out, which would be totally legal, no matter where he is. But that, again, that's only once per game. And then the sage here, the sage is the guy who can actually bring rooms back from the void. Which is incredibly useful if you find yourself in a situation where you are no longer connected to the entryway of the dungeon and there are no more room tiles to explore. Normally that would be a game over situation, but the sage can potentially save you from that. In addition, you don't bring that room's ritual card back, so it won't acquire cultists anymore. So while the deck will still move just as fast because these cards come out of the deck whenever the rooms do, accelerating the end of the game. In this case, now you know you have a guaranteed safe room that you can put onto the map, which is really useful. He also can redirect where the cultists go. Normally, whenever you draw a card, like this Pendulum Blades, you put the cultist in the room, Pendulum Blades. This guy can go, no, we don't want Pendulum Blades to have a cultist. We're gonna put it in this Dragonling room instead. Because we either don't care about the Dragonling room or the Dragonling room doesn't have a cultist yet, so it's not gonna blow up and make that room disappear. Lots of tactical decisions, and all of the characters combine in different and interesting ways. So you can have the warrior running around on guard duty, like taking care of cultists, but if he's doing that, who's picking up the strength tokens? Do you go after one specific type of token first? And try to get that accomplished, and then free everybody up to work together on the others? Or do you kind of divide and conquer with everybody going off on their own separate ways? It's really intense, it's really fun, and it plays really fast. Turns are really simple. You just spend your 3 action points, and then draw cards equal to this to determine which rooms get cultists, and then move to the next player's turn. Like, people who've played this game a couple of times are going to just whip right through it. Win or lose, they'll move right through this game. It's awesome. It's great as a solo game. Absolutely fantastic as a solo game, because the game itself kind of scales with the number of players. Because while it'll be about the same number of turns total, you will get more individual turns as your character, which is pretty neat. But yeah, awesome game. They're going to be adding additional stuff to it in the Kickstarter. I highly recommend this one. I am absolutely backing, and am so excited to be able to add another easier, lighter co-op to my shelves. It'll join the Forbidden games is something that I can pull out, and this one plays a little bit better with more seasoned gamers, more experienced gamers. I hate to say that because the Forbidden games are not bad games at all. I just prefer this one. There's more going on, there's more to do, there's more control in the hands of the players, as far as what you deal with and what kind of risk management you engage in. So, again, this is a little bit different from me. I don't normally do standard reviews, but this game, I played it and I just had to say something. It was really cool to be able to play it before it hit Kickstarter, and it's a lot of fun. So, if it at all interests you, I'll put the link to the Kickstarter down below. If the Kickstarter's still going on, I suggest you back if you like cooperative games or if you like dungeon crawls. Otherwise, that's it. Fire of Eidolon, awesome game. Anyway, Bearded Rogue, out.